Okay, Stephanie, we are live on YouTube.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. It is Tuesday, October 14th. I'm Stephanie Simone Mahaney, the Chair of the Zoning and Land Use Committee. We have one agenda item tonight, but two presentations regarding the ballot proposals on the upcoming November ballot. We have two presenters. The first is John Mangan from the New York City Charter Revision Commission, and the commission approved and certified these proposals. And the second presenter will be Anne McQuahey from the New York City Council. But we will begin with John this evening. So John, if you would like to proceed.
Okay, how do
Thank you.
I advance
Oh.
the slides here?
Okay,
Justine
I think I will. You'll just tell me next slide and I
Okay.
will.
You mind if I get a little closer
Oh,
here?
absolutely. So
absolutely.
you're in screen or
Okay, thanks a lot for everybody for having me down tonight. John Mangan, Policy Director for the Charter Revision Commission. Next slide. First off, the Charter Revision Commission, it was constituted in December. It includes 13 civic luminaries, chaired by Richard Bury, former deputy mayor in de Blasio administration. He's the guy who got universal pre-K off the ground. Carl Weisbrod, who's been a city fixer since, I don't know, the Koch administration. Anita Lermont, former city planning chair who hired me into city government, 11, 12 years ago. People with a range of experience in New York City government and the private sector here. The purpose of the commission, while it examined the entire charter, was really to look at housing and land use issues, which we'll get into in a second. Next slide. Just very quickly, the commission held 10 meetings, 2 in each borough, in the first part of 2025. 30 hours of testimony, 800 participants, 3,000 written comments. And what I'll present today is an attempt to distill what we heard from the public. Next slide. So, why was this constituted? It was created by the mayor and the deputy mayor at the time, Maria Torres Springer, to continue looking at issues of housing and land use in New York City. As many of you are aware, as community board members, the city is suffering from a pretty severe housing shortage, a 1.4 vacancy rate, which is the lowest that it's been since the 1960s. And what are the consequences of that? We can go to the next slide. Well, when housing is experiencing such a severe shortage, it drives a lot of things that are very harmful to people around the city. We hear a lot about gentrification and displacement pressures. We hear a ton about rising rents. We hear about segregation and homelessness. And all these things are fundamentally driven by the fact that there's not enough housing for people, that tenants have no options, that even people with money have to go farther and farther out in the city, putting pressure on neighborhoods, on the margins of the city. It's just, as we all have experienced in one way or another, or people who are close to us, it's just really, really hard to house yourself in New York City. And so the Charter Revision Commission wanted to take a look at those aspects of this issue that are governed by the charter. Not everything that relates to the housing shortage is in the charter. There's a bunch of state law issues. There are a million different issues. But the thing that the charter governs is the land use review procedures that basically determine how land use regulation changes over time. It's the thing that enables the city to grow and change and adapt with changing circumstances as the decades roll by. Next. So I would say that after all those hearings and all that we heard, issues related to housing and land use really clustered around a few different issues. One is that, many parts of the city are producing very little or even no affordable housing. If you go to, community districts, neighborhoods in the South Bronx, they are just like off the charts producing affordable housing every year in and year out. You might think like, well, I heard that like South Bronx that doesn't have a super strong housing market. How come like 4 out of the top 10 community districts in terms of housing production are in the South Bronx? So they produce a ton. Other parts of the city, parts of Eastern Queens, for instance, produce very little every year, like an average of 0 or 3 units per year or whatever. Next, the commission noted that, if you look at rezonings over the last 10 years, some neighborhoods see a ton of land use change, a ton of rezonings, a ton of applications to produce more housing. Where other neighborhoods really don't. They don't see applications at all. They remain unchanged, even as housing costs go through the roof, even as people suffer, people have to move away. I've been talking to this Pastor Mitchell, Antioch Baptist in Queens, who's talked about the way that housing prices, rising housing costs have basically meant his congregation has like disappeared from around him. Like the older folks have moved on, the younger kids can't afford to live in the neighborhood anymore. And so he struggles to keep his church going because just housing costs so much that everybody has to move to Florida or whatever in order to make ends meet. Next, there are parts of the city that are like completely off limits to any kind of zoning change. This is a picture of Kirk Goodrich, affordable housing developer. We just heard from Simon Bacchus, another affordable housing developer last week, that said, the first thing that he does when he has access to a piece of land is he says, who's the council member? Will they support a rezoning or not? And in huge parts of the city, maybe a third or even more of the city, where council members are saying, absolutely no, we will not support rezonings there, he says, okay, thank you, I'm moving on, I'm next. Maybe I can find a piece of land in the South Bronx where people are willing to go along with zoning changes in order to make it happen. And so that just means that the city has effectively 2 or even 3 different zoning regimes, places where that adapt to growth and change in New York City, and places that are completely off limits in a way that creates extremely inequitable housing production. If you look at any given year, maybe like 9 or 10 community districts produce as much housing as the other 49 or 50 combined. Over the last decade, 12 community districts have produced as much as the other 47, which is an issue that was of concern to the Charter Revision Commission. Next. I talked a little bit about how Kirk Goodrich or Simon Bacchus or whatever, they really view New York City land use through the lens of what council district am I in? And that's an issue that's known as member deference. The council as a whole will generally defer to the council member in whose district the rezoning is, because everybody wants that deference in return. May sound totally reasonable, but in the 36 years since we put ULURP in place, the commission, the Charter Revision Commission, has come to understand what some of the costs of that are, which is, housing shortage, unequal systems of housing production in ways that ultimately lead to New Yorkers suffering it, especially farther down the income levels, but farther and farther up as well. Okay, next. These are just some of the folks who participated and are in support of these proposals, which were gratified. The Charter Revision Commission is gratified that they have heard from so many people and have support. Next. And now we'll get into some of the actual proposals themselves. First off, I want to say that the commission staff, we absolutely love ULURP, the Uniform Land Use Review Procedure. It provides guaranteed access to a time-limited process, that balances neighborhood perspectives against citywide needs. We think that in the overwhelming majority of cases, it works really well. The commission, however, was really focused on places where that breaks down, whether it's for really modest projects like ULURP. It takes 7 months. It takes, environmental review. It costs a lot of money. As you know, on the community board, people don't bother to apply for rezonings often unless they can like double or even triple the capacity on the site. Projects that have a ton of upside so that they can recoup the costs of that process. And that creates a lot of anxiety among community boards, among members of neighborhoods and things like that. What about smaller, more modest changes that could enable neighborhoods to grow organically over time? Those are basically completely off limits. They do not happen. And I mentioned different parts of the city where zoning change can't happen either. So overwhelmingly, first proposal, the thing that the commissioners heard the most is we need a fast track for affordable housing. Everybody or almost everybody agrees we need more affordable housing. That's a type of project that we can, define a category and then enable it to happen quicker in more places. So the first ballot question number 2, as I mentioned, the first question is one about like state land upstate or whatever, is a fast track for affordable housing. The question does that in 2 ways. First, a fast track for publicly financed affordable housing at the Board of Standards and Appeals. Next. So in order to qualify for this, you have to be public finance. So it has to be an HPD project or financed by, Department of Housing Community Renewal up at the state level. Some government entity has to support it. That means that it's going to be 100% affordable housing. In that instance, instead of going through a rezoning, you can go to the Board of Standards and Appeals, 5 members appointed by the mayor with the advice and consent of the city planning commission, and the city council, advice and consent of city council, and you can get project specific approvals for that affordable housing project. So you go in, you'd say, my project does not comport with the zoning in these ways. I need project specific approvals in order to make it happen. The Board of Standards and Appeals will look at the project. If you can meet the neighborhood character finding, which is something they do in a range of other applications, if your project fits in with the neighborhood and is publicly financed, then you have the ability to get project-specific approvals for that project. Say financing falls through, it doesn't actually happen for whatever reason, things happen. You haven't changed the zoning at all, so nothing changes there. And I would say, there's have been other issues in South Brooklyn, like this one on Coyle Avenue, and I think Sheepshead Bay, where an affordable housing project had to go through rezoning, financing went through, it became a shelter, people freaked out. So this type of approval process actually provides assurances to everybody, including communities, that what they see is what they get is going to be 100% affordable project. One of the most powerful moments of testimony that I heard was up at Fordham in the Bronx. Erica Stallings, affordable housing developer. She wanted to do 100% affordable in Queens. Okay, you need a rezoning. She comes into city planning. City planning says, well, you need a little bit bigger rezoning area, to make a rational map. Captured a parking lot. Okay, you got to do a full environmental impact statement at this point. She's 2 years in it, $700,000 into it, getting this rezoning for her project. It gets to council. Council just cuts it back to the applicant site anyway. So she spent all that money, went through all that time for no reason, really. If this had been available, she could have just gone to the BSA, gotten her approval for 100% affordable, and been done with it. That $700,000 that she had to spend on environmental review could have gone to create more units, could have gone to, drive down affordability, whatever. So the commission, this was the first thing that they did in order to respond to the calls for fast track for affordable housing. Next. The next one is affordable housing fast track in community districts that produce the least amount of housing. Next slide here. So a couple years back, City Council unanimously approved the Fair Housing Framework. It's an amazing document. It's something that city government is going to get to work on in the next month or two, which is analyzing housing and creating housing targets for every single community district in the city. Now, it's a great thing to have. It doesn't itself have any teeth. So the Charter Revision Commission, again, in response to testimony, said, how can we give this thing some teeth? And so every 5 years under this proposal, city planning and HPD will note how much affordable housing is created in every single community district in the city. And then the bottom 12, so like the bottom fifth of community districts and the bottom 12 that produce the least, there will be a fast track approval process for zoning actions that include at least mandatory inclusionary housing levels of affordability. So if you're a project in one of those dozen community districts that produce the least, you will have a fast track process. What is that process? 60 days review at community board and borough president, concurrent review. So basically the same amount of review the community boards get today, and then 30 days at the commission. And then that's it. So instead of full 7 months of ULURP, it's a 90-day approval in an attempt to make some affordable housing happen in parts of the city where it doesn't. Next. Okay, I've already explained this. Next one. So we've heard a lot from various opponents of these proposals that like this just gives unilateral approval power to the mayor. It would basically shift some power towards the Board of Standards and Appeals and City Planning Commission. Both of these are mayorally appointed bodies with advice and consent of the city council. And they're also entities that are very constrained by state and local law. City Planning Commission, it can't do anything unless it comports with a well-considered plan. They do not report to the mayor. Both of these bodies have terms that span mayoral administrations. So this idea that it somehow just gives the mayor like unilateral authority over what happens and what doesn't is not the intent of this proposal, nor is it what it accomplishes. What it really is trying to do is in a targeted, pinpointed way, address some of the issues that with 36 years of experience with ULURP have gotten in the way of housing and affordable housing production. Next. Okay, next, you've heard of ULURP, Uniform Land Use Review Procedure. Everybody knows how that works. The next question is ELURP, Expedited Land Use Review Procedure for certain categories of projects that are either so small that ULURP can't handle them, or that are particularly crucial types of projects around things like climate change and resiliency and open space and infrastructure and things like that. So the categories here, very briefly: modest increases for housing capacity, works a little differently in higher density areas than lower density areas. We'll get into that. Dispositions and acquisitions for affordable housing, kumbaya, do we need to go through full ULURP for these types of things that, almost everybody agrees should happen? City map changes for housing and for resiliency projects that can add years to projects, but we think can happen faster. And then infrastructure, open space, and resiliency. I'll get into it next. So, as far as the map changes go, in medium and high density districts, that is R6 and above, you would be able to do a rezoning as long as you were not increasing residential capacity above 30% through this expedited process. I personally looked at the last 10 years of rezonings in New York City. We had a big fat 0 rezonings for 30% or less increase in capacity. Why? ULURP takes time. Costs a lot of money. It's not worth it. Is create a pathway for more modest types that can add housing, and then we also think will not anxiety inducing for neighborhoods as a doubling or tripling of capacity would be, as you typically see in ULURP. Basically, all of the rezonings that go through this would have mandatory inclusionary housing attached. So they would be, or at the very least, you would need to provide affordable housing in order to max out your site. And so we think that that would be a win-win. It would be additive to the types of projects we see in the ULURP pipeline today. In low density areas, this is R1 through R5. These are districts that, have a maximum standard height of 45 feet, maximum FAR of 2 FAR. I've also looked at the last 10 years in low density districts. You would be able to rezone from any low density district to any other low density district through this process. There were basically 2 applications that did that in the last 10 years out of hundreds. So it's another type of application that doesn't happen. Today, if you're in R1 through R5 and you're getting a rezoning, you are leaping into the medium or high density districts. You're not making little adjustments that would provide more housing while, keeping in character with the other zoning districts in your low density area. So we would enable these 2 types of modest increases to housing capacity through this expedited process, similar to the one I mentioned before. 60 days, community board and borough president, 30 days at commission, and you're done. Instead of 7 months, 3 months. All right, next. So we've heard from various folks. I don't know if you guys work with George Janes. We saw a memo that he was sending around that said MIH would not apply to these rezonings. I don't think he quite understands how MIH applicability works under existing policy. I was part of the team that created the program 10 years ago now. Under existing policy, for all the changes in the table and almost anyone that you can imagine under this this process, it would trigger MIH. So if you were getting any kind of rezoning like that, you're getting mandatory inclusionary housing, mandatory permanently affordable housing in a way that, in the testimony heard by the commission, people seem to want. Okay, next.
Quick-
Yeah.
Can I interject quickly?
Please.
You said on every application for rezoning, like even the low density? I'm sorry.
No, this is just MIH is a program that only applies at R6 and above.
Okay, so it's, but for the low density, so there's no change there.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
Confirming
We're-
that. All right, thank
Yeah,
you.
sorry about that. Okay, next. Okay, climate, infrastructure, and open space. There, I can't tell you how many city agencies we talked to that, you know, we want to do a resiliency project in the coastal area. We need to confirm or adjust the city map. We need to, you know, do a map change in order to raise the elevation of streets above the flood elevation. And, you know, DOT's out there, they're repaving the road anyway, but they can't take the time, spend the money to go through a 2-year process to get a city map change in order to raise the street grade a foot so that you can make that street more resilient in the face of climate change, increased flooding, and everything else. We heard from city agencies that want to roll out more, you know, solar power, for instance. Solar companies need certainty. That requires a full disposition today, which can take years. And so we get less investment in solar on city-owned property than we might otherwise have. This would enable the city to lease, not to sell, but to lease city-owned property to solar companies to expand rollout of solar energy and make the city government greener. Flood buyouts. You're a 1-2 family homeowner in a high hazard area. You want to get out of harm's way. Did you know that as a single family owner, you would have to go through a full ULURP in order to accept a buyout from the city? Like, people don't have that kind of time. Like, people do not want to be living in a flood zone for years and years longer than they have to in order to get out of harm's way. This would, for 1 to 3 family homes, provide an expedited process for voluntary buyouts. This doesn't in any way increase the city's ability to do eminent domain or something like that at all. This is for homeowners that want to do it. It streamlines the process for them. Okay, next. Next, Affordable Housing Appeals Board. I mentioned how, okay, so you may or may not know, we're getting sued by a bunch of people to this Charter Revision Commission to prevent these questions from being on the ballot. The lawsuit includes a bunch of like council members like Bob Holden in Queens or Joanne Ariola, you know, Susan Zhuang, you know, various folks who have kind of made their brand out of like, not in my council district, nothing, none of this stuff is going to happen. And so what happens is in districts like that, where the brand is not in my council district, even if a Kirk Goodrich or a Simon Bacchus or somebody has potential to create affordable housing or has potential to create housing change in that part of town, they don't do it at all. Those parts of the city become total no-go zones. So the commission really struggled. They're like, how can we change that dynamic? What can we do in order to change that dynamic? You can't, you know, mandate through a charter revision process that housing happen in those areas, but at the same time, they recognize some of the shortcomings of the existing process. So the idea there was, instead of this like useless mayoral veto at the end of ULURP, for projects that provide affordable housing, so pretty narrow group of projects, not everything, projects that provide affordable housing in a single borough, so not citywide stuff that, you know, the politics there work differently. And so, you know, people can negotiate and talk and get things done on that context. Single borough. If council disapproves or modifies affordable housing projects at the end of the process, then either the applicant or the Affordable Housing Appeals Board itself can call them up. Who's on the Affordable Housing Appeals Board? The mayor, the speaker of the city council, and the affected borough president. If 2 out of 3 of those elected officials want to, they would be able to overturn a disapproval of an affordable housing project, or they would be able to restore an affordable housing project as it was approved by the city planning commission. Now, I heard former head of city council land use talking about this project at a public event last week. I agree with him. He said, I don't think that the Affordable Housing Appeals Board is going to have to like constitute itself or be overturning proposals and modifying proposals and things like that. What it does is it creates it's a slight change to structure that encourages city council to get to yes on types of projects that today it's just easier to say, go away. If you're a project in a Bob Holden's district or if you're a project in Joanne Ariola's or Vicky Palladino's district, you're not getting proposed at all. You're never going to see those applications because what's the point? No one's going to spend the money, take the time for an application that's just going to get killed at the end anyway. But if you have this slightly different structure, if you can ask the borough president to, do you support this project? Then there's some hope that a zoning change could happen in a Bob Holden district or happen in a Vicky Palladino district. And, the council doesn't want to get overruled by an appeals board. So what it does is it just gives the council as a whole the incentive to get to yes, to do what they're supposed to do. Their city council as a whole, they should consider these projects as a whole rather than always deferring to the individual council member. And so the former head of city planning land use said, this is what happens. It subtly shifts the dynamic to create possibilities for types of projects that can't happen today. Next slide. So yeah, here we go. This is New York Housing Conference. The number of affordable housing units per district. Surprising number of these, not coincidentally, are folks who are suing the Charter Revision Commission right now to keep these questions from the voters, to say you're not even allowed voters to vote on these. We're suing to keep them off. And so this in particular is the Charter Revision Commission's attempt to deal with that member deference issue that's not in the charter, so it's really hard to get at. Next slide. Again, I described this pretty much, 3 members, mayor, speaker, borough president, things like community benefits agreements or labor agreements, or those things are outside zoning. This would not touch those types of things. We've heard city council say again and again, oh, this appeals board, it would take away their ability to negotiate more affordable housing out of projects. Well, let me tell you, the ball game is not the projects that get into ULURP and get approved at the end of them. The ball game is all the applications that never even get proposed because it would be pointless. So this proposal gives a pathway, gives hope to all these projects that never get proposed under the existing system. So that's the deal. Next.
What number proposal is that? I'm not sure where we are.
4.
This is number 4, Affordable Housing Appeals Board.
Okay, that
Yeah.
corresponds. Thank you.
Okay, next. And now we're getting into the less controversial ones, the ones that people don't care about as much. City map. The city map is the official map of all the streets in the city, the parks, some other really crucial aspects of city land that it's often necessary to confirm or to change in order to do certain resilience projects or sometimes certain housing projects, things like that. Believe it or not, the city map still exists. It never consolidated with the rest of the city in 1898. Pre-1938 maps are still in canvas in all the borough halls. So anybody who needs something from the city map that deals with those things, it can take you a really long time. It's just hugely inefficient. It's redundant. At the same time, it's just, it's really hard to staff up the BP topo offices and it just creates an unending series of problems. So this question would take the 5 city maps made out of canvas, consolidate them into a single unified city map administered by the Department of City Planning. It would digitize that completely in the next 2 years, and then it would go through ULURP in order to make that digital map the official city map in a way that would enable you to confirm with a snap of a finger things that today can take months or even years. Question?
We'll go to questions
Oh,
now.
sorry.
Sorry.
It's all right.
Just committee members, and then if you
right.
continue.
Sorry, I'll talk to you later.
Go Bellin.
Okay, so fairly straightforward. Haven't gotten a lot of heat on this one. All right, next. Finally, the Charter Revision Commission, they did not intend to touch elections, but oh boy, did they hear a lot about elections. And so this proposal would move city election from odd years to even years, align mayoral elections with city presidential elections in a way that in other jurisdictions has been one weird trick to dramatically increase voter turnout. Next. So this graph right here, I see it's kind of like end of civilization here. It's like late 60s, early 70s. We had 80% turnout for mayor races. The last mayoral election was like 23% or something like that. There's just been such decline in participation in local elections that if you align with the federal election, we would dramatically, if other jurisdictions are part of, or any indication, would at least double turnout and make sure more voices are heard when it comes to local elections. Next. One more thing I should say about that. In order to actually change the election from even to odd, or from odd to even, sorry, you need local approval and a referendum, and then you need a state constitutional change. Both those things have to happen. Doesn't matter which order. So voting, if this question passes, then the city has done its part, and then it puts pressure on the state to do theirs. But it does not automatically result in even year elections yet. That still depends on future state action. So what is the commission up to now? Since they approved these questions in July, public education campaigns like this, voting is happening. It's actually already happening. Overseas ballots, military ballots, early voting for folks like us begins on the 25th. Election day is the 4th. And so that's the next thing. And so in the meantime, we're just getting out there and trying to educate as many folks as we can about these proposals. Whatever the agenda is today, I'm happy to answer any questions when the time comes.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Questions or bring it to the next?
See how Anna's on time, maybe?
I'm here.
Just go to Anne.
Yeah.
Okay, before we go to questions, I'd like to proceed and cover the next presentation from City Council. Anne, would you begin if you would?
Yeah, I can. Do I have permission to screen share?
Yes, you do.
Okay. Let me make sure I get the right one. Okay. Am I screen sharing?
I don't see you.
All right,
Yeah.
hang on, give me a
Oh,
second.
I see it now. It's coming.
There you go. Okay. So thank you for having us. John, nice to see you.
And
Tinily in the room. Well, I don't think this is going to be redundant because respectfully, I think, as you can imagine, we have a different take on what these proposals do. I will say at the top, I do agree with John on 2 points. One, we do have a housing crisis, and 2, ULURP works. In terms of how to solve the housing crisis, though, I think there could be a respectful difference of opinion. I think what the Mayor's Commission is doing just objectively is cutting out a key player in ULURP, which is the most democratically elected part of our process here. And I know I'm talking to the land use committee, so you're familiar with ULURP, et cetera. So my proposal, my deck focuses on land use questions 2, 3, and 4. We refer to question 1 as the ski question. That's statewide. So if we, and this will be just a little bit redundant, and I know you all know, land development in the city is mainly guided by the zoning resolution. And if you want to go outside those bounds, you need special discretionary permission. And that is what is today now known as the ULURP process, the Uniform Land Use Review Procedures. And, it starts with the pre-certification process. People always say it takes so long to get through ULURP, and I've been practicing in this area for almost 30 years, despite my youthful appearance. But in my mind's eye, whether I was in private practice or now in government practice, is the most certain part of ULURP is the actual 7-month ULURP process. The council only gets 50 days to make a decision. The real problem with the length of time of ULURP is what we refer to colloquially as the pre-certification process. And I know that John's commission dealt with some potential proposals to kind of speed that along, but this involves environmental review. It's complicated. But I sometimes am hearing the argument that the council is slowing this down, and that's just simply not the case. I think the Department of City Planning needs more resources to more timely get projects through to certification to enter this known process where the community board has 60 days, followed by the borough president having 60 days, followed by the city planning commission having 60 days, and then the council has 50 days. It could be extended to 65 days if we make a modification, but that's how ULURP works now. And here, actually, yes, ULURP works. We have this in our proposal. You will see that the council has, since 2022, been involved in the approval of over 142,000 units of housing. The council, as you know, as community boards, your role is advisory. You spend a lot of time looking at ULURP applications, and no one necessarily needs to follow what your recommendations are. I think community boards in the main would say their strongest trigger in getting their voices heard through an actor that does have power to affect and shape a zoning proposal is through their local council member. The local council member obviously knows their district inside and out, knows, what street floods when there's like five minutes of rain, knows that there's a school short, there's a shortage of school seats, et cetera. They are the keepers of their community. And this term member deference, it gets a bad rap. People can have their various views on it. But, I also think you can look at member deference as these are the council members that kind of know their community. John mentioned something about 1/3 of the city being off limits due to member deference. I have no idea where that number comes from. It doesn't sound right to me, but I'll just leave that there.
Anne, we're losing you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, you faded in and out a little bit. I don't know if it's on my end or if it was on your end.
Oh, I
Could
don't
be.
know. I'm in my office, so.
Okay.
Okay. So I was just saying that, I don't, the stat that 1/3 of the city is off limits due to member deference, I have no idea where that's coming from. It doesn't sound correct to me. These are some fairly recent examples of some two neighborhood rezonings and one large project where, the council was able to not only make sure that the proposal and the added density was appropriate for the area, and we made modifications on all these proposals, but we got more affordable housing, and more importantly, we got capital commitments from the administration, because you can't just zone in a vacuum. You can't just say we're putting 20,000 new people in this area, but we're going to ignore the fact that the traffic doesn't work, or the sewage infrastructure is failing, or the school seats are insufficient, or the open space is insufficient. And respectfully, an advisory community board recommendation is not going to hold a lot of weight if you take out one of these main actors. So we are of the position here that ULURP works. Now, John has gone through the proposals, so I don't want to be too redundant, but if we start with we call it 2A. Question 2 really has two parts. There's the part that involves the Board of Standards and Appeals, and then part 2B, which we'll talk about, is the expedited process for the community districts that have the 12 community districts that have the lowest production of affordable housing. And I'm going to give you a little preview here. Community Board 10 in Brooklyn is in that number. They are part of what some people call the dirty dozen. Haven't done enough affordable housing, so they're going into this expedited process. And I just wanted to point that out because I don't think that was clear from John's description of 2A, that this is, I'm sorry, of 2B, that it's going to apply to you. For BSA, I think I just want to, there were a couple of notes. I know it's the concerns we have about the BSA question is the lack of public accountability. The BSA is appointed exclusively by the mayor. And they do serve for terms, but they don't always serve for terms. And when mayoral administrations change, members of the board tend to change, or that member tends to align with the mayor so that they don't have to, change. But again, it's just this lack of neighborhood voice. I think in my memory here of my time at the council, CB10 has had some fights with the Board of Standards and Appeals about various projects that have been in your community. But, more importantly, the commission is saying that this is going to be only publicly financed housing projects and 100% affordable. And while that might be the intent, that's not what the law that they propose says. It simply says that the building has to be owned in whole or part by a company exclusively developed for housing for persons of low income. So while that may be the intent, we all know that the charter is basically the constitution of the city. It lasts a long time. It's difficult to change it. We all know because John's commission has gone through great lengths to attempt to do so and put these questions before the ballot. But there is not a requirement in the law, if this proposal passes, that it would have to be publicly financed at all for that matter, but 100% affordable. So I just wanted to give a little bit of clarity on that. And I also don't agree with John's characterization that this BSA special permit would, prevent the possibility of a Coil Street, which is an application in Sheepshead Bay, where an affordable housing project went through ULURP, and it went through the council, got approved, and then they flipped the site, and now it's a New York City a mayoral sponsored homeless shelter. I don't think that the BSA special permit could avoid that. I don't think that's a guarantee at all. So it's just how we're viewing the legislation. But I think that is important to point out as well. So there is a neighborhood character finding, as John pointed out, in the BSA special permit, but you could have something like a picture of what we're seeing here on the right, where you have low scale developed like low scale built form, and the BSA could come in and by special permit, without changing the underlying zoning, put something in that they consider to be, that meets, various requirements they consider to be neighborhood character. But neighborhood character is a very nebulous standard, and frankly, it changes over time. I've seen that over my couple of decades of doing this. And so that's that. And then if I go to 2B, this is the fast track MIH developments. That's what I was talking about how you would basically be able to upzone areas with just, they're shortening the process to overlap both community board review and borough president review to 60 days. Then it goes to city planning, and then it goes through council, is completely cut out. So your community board falls into this category. And if this proposal passes, you would be in it for at least 5 years. And it remains to be seen whether or not whether the people at the bottom 12 could ever grow out of it. Maybe Bay Ridge, because well, they'll upzone it and you'll have more housing built. So this mostly affects South Brooklyn, central, most of Staten Island, and Southwest and Northeast Queens, and the Upper East Side and the Upper West Side, which I was surprised to find out how little they had as well. I'm an Upper East Sider myself. And so again, with this proposal, we have the same concerns, the lack of a community voice. We see the council member as, the enforceable voice of what communities, need and what community boards believe that their neighborhood deserves. It does allow market rate housing. I will say this, John talked about the applicability of mandatory inclusionary housing, and everyone's always confused by it. And I will tell you, I even get confused by what's going to trigger MIH or not. And because the standard of applying it is not found in law, it's policy driven. So, policies can change over time. So you're kind of, that's something to also keep in mind. And that Community Board 10 is in this geography, and certainly the other 12, and I actually have here. This is a map of what it is, and your community board ranks number 1 in the lowest production of affordable units. And you'll see.
To be clear, this list has not been calculated yet and would not be calculated for over a year. So I don't know how you can.
John, I didn't interrupt your presentation. I would appreciate the same.
Okay, but after the 5th time saying this, I just need a point of clarification.
You think CB10 will not be on this list?
Yes. I'll rebut later, but go ahead. You keep repeating something that is unequivocally false.
You think CB10 will not be on this list?
And you can keep going and I'll respond afterwards, but the list does not exist right now.
I know the list doesn't exist, John. We're just trying to educate the public of how we think if these proposals come to being, how the list will form.
I will respond after your presentation, Ann. But I just want everybody to know this list does not exist, would not be calculated for well over a year from now.
Okay, well, we've read the law and we've looked at HPD open data and we have made the assumptions based on how this list will be calculated. And this is what we believe, how we believe the list will turn out, give or take. So, and then John can rebut that later. He showed you a chart of council districts, which is not what the law requires the calculation to be done on. It's supposed to be done on community districts. So that, talk about misleading. But in any event, so this proposal mostly will affect you. You know, in CB10, and you'll have, you know, you'll lose the council voice in upzonings and more densities to your neighborhood. That's just going to be the practical effect. These are just some illustrations of buildings where you can see there's concern about potential out of context new buildings being brought into the area without a full, what is now considered ULURP, you know, the full land use review process. And I know this is getting a lot. I'm trying not to be too redundant. When we go to ELURP, which you know, I think John gave a good explanation of it. It is limited. It's a limited subset of what is now ULURP applications that will fall into ELURP. You know, I guess the concerns that we have on this is, you know, CPC is a majority mayor board. You know, so he or she, the mayor, whoever that is, has, you know, 7 out of the 13 votes. Again, a lot of these concerns become redundant in these proposals about the reduction in neighborhood input. All low density areas, which your community district is mostly low density. You kind of have very little R6. I don't think anything above R6.
R7, yeah.
I'm sorry?
We do have R7. A
Oh,
small-
okay.
Yeah, in certain areas of the district, we do have R7.
Okay, yeah. But I would say in the main part of you are low density, and that could where you see, like, you know, single and two, even if it's not zoned as a single family residential district, the built form is, you know, one, and what it looks to be, for all appearances, one and two family homes. You could see 4-story multiple dwelling buildings. And so these are just some, well, this is a more of a high density, which you say you do have some R6 and R7. And this is meant to illustrate, you know, maybe what could happen with 30%, a 30% jump from something of density from something that is presently R6 that could go up, you know, to R7 too, is a big jump in terms of building form and allowable density. Well, these pictures kind of represent where you see, like here on the right, you have, like, you know, you see 2-story homes, and now all of a sudden you have a 4-story multiple dwelling building. Let's see. So we have the Affordable Housing Appeals Board, and I just want to see, because there was something. I think, you know, they're trying to sell, well, there's a lot of talk about, from people who advocate for these proposals, which is fine, is to get rid of the useless mayoral veto. And that's not the purpose of it. It's kind of to get, in my opinion, it's to get rid of the council voice. But and John even pointed this out, is that, you know, the council could, let's say, on a neighborhood rezoning where they've worked together to cut density in appropriate places, and, you know, and he's right, the capital improvements that are secured on the side would not be subject to being taken back by this board. But you could have the work of the local council member who knows their community, who works with the community board to say, all right, this is what the neighborhood zoning should look like. We think they've proposed too much density here, too much density there. They could end run the local council member by just getting the borough president on board. And, you know, the borough president has a wider perspective about the borough than they do about individual neighborhoods. And let's see, sorry. So these are again just reducing the local members' negotiating power. Local concerns like community investment and neighborhood character will be left up to the appeals board. And while you couldn't, if an agreement was reached with if the council member reached an agreement, if the council reached an agreement with the administration saying, yes, we're going to invest $100 million in sewers because we're making all these upgrades, John's correct, they couldn't pull that back. But when the council member is fighting for their district, trying to get the needed capital investment to accompany the zoning changes and the increased density, the mayor's office could be like, you know what? We don't have to play ball with them. All we have to do is convince the borough president, who's not in the local community, that we should either, that we should reverse any density cuts that the council member thought was appropriate. These are just a couple of examples of recent neighborhood, large-scale neighborhood rezonings where the local council member worked to, secure additional public housing and schools and redesigns of public streets, like $115 million to redesign Atlantic Avenue and $100 million for parks and open space. And that was because there was going to be this introduction under this neighborhood rezoning of a big influx of people who that needed open space, needed school seats, needed, affordable housing. And if this project was going to the appeals board, I don't think that the administration would be as incentivized to work with the council to get an agreement for what the local community needed. And they would just wait for the appeals board and see if they can get the borough president on board. But, these things will play out, in the future, if these proposals are adopted. But, the purpose of my talking to you is just talk about what we see as concerns and some of the things that are not being advertised in presentations of, hey, this is going to fast track affordable housing. The council does have a very established record of, producing hundreds of thousands over the years of affordable housing. And I think what we think is the better solution is more resources to city planning to do neighborhood rezonings and do comprehensive planning approaches, and not to cut the council out on this voice. I'm only going to do those 3 questions. John very kindly gave you a preview of the other 3. And then if anyone is interested, there is this website called whatsonmyballot.nyc. And that is where you can find more information about your ballot proposals. And I'm going to stop sharing right now. And
thank you very much. Just a quick question about that website that you just introduced.
oh, sorry, yeah.
Does that have more comprehensive information and explanations than the New York City vote booklet that discusses the proposals?
Yes, I think so. I just got my ballot guide in the mail yesterday. I was reading it over my morning coffee.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. To
Yeah,
be fair, the what's on my ballot is basically content free. It does not have any information on the proposals. It's council's website opposing the proposals, and so it just says would cause gentrification, would take away neighborhood voice, but it will not tell you anything about the actual content of the ballot questions. For that, you can go to charter.nyc.
Okay. Well, thank you for the input.
I would disagree with that, but maybe you can visit John's real estate PAC that's supporting these proposals.
Okay, I am going to open it to the committee, but I just wanted to state that after listening to about 3 hours worth of testimony in front of the Charter Revision Commission, one of the predominant issues is about member deference, and it is very concerning that the voice of the community board may not be heard, or the voice of the communities, particularly since we are already having difficulty with that, particularly at the borough president level or the borough level. So this remains a concern, at least for me, but I would like to open up to the committee questions for either John or Anne. Anyone? And I have two members in the room, two of your committee members, and then others are,
And the public too.
and the public as well. That's right. But committee first. Nothing specific? Okay. Do you have public members
We do.
but I'm sorry, you had a question earlier that since you raised, if you could go first.
Yeah, that last question.
If-
The city council member of any city council district and the community boards of within the whole city are the voice of the local people, the citizens, the residents. It sounds like all proposals create a system of law where power is centralized rather than power and decision-making being spread out, pushed out to the furthest areas where the people live. Power and decision-making is being concentrated in unaccountable boards or representatives who are unelected. There's a saying I'm sure you've all heard, think globally, but act locally. Well, the thing is that the local people want what the local people want. And I won't speak for what local people in the South Bronx want. Let them speak for what they want. I will only speak for local people that I know in my neighborhood. And I realize that there are opposing groups within my neighborhood in terms of their views on development. But in any case, whether it's the South Bronx or it's Bay Ridge with opposing groups, some of whom want one thing and others want something else regarding development, the idea that a highly centralized bureaucracy makes all of these decisions and that there is no, as you put it, deference to the local community boards or the local city council members. There's no deference to what the representatives on the most local level think that their constituents, their people want. There's no deference to that. And what I've heard today is that these plans want to eliminate deference to what the people's voice wants. And that, to me, I look and I see that there must be other reasons, other powerful interests who want centralized power, whether those people are developers or construction
question.
companies or politicians. All of these things are opposed to what local people want.
Would you like to respond?
Sure. When I said at the outset of the presentation that the Charter Revision Commission and its staff love ULURP, we meant it. ULURP remains the rule for almost all the types of applications that see ULURP today. What the commission was trying to do is preserve ULURP as it exists and then identify places where it simply doesn't work. More modest types of projects, parts of the city where you can't pass any rezonings, and expand the pipeline in that way. In the 36 years of experience with current ULURP, the commission heard so much testimony about what the consequences of that have been, which is really, really rampant inequity and inequality about the way that land use happens around the city. I recognize some people like that status quo. They want it. Other people think that it's not really fair that parts of central Brooklyn or northern Manhattan bear the brunt of the housing shortage, where, you know, folks like Bob Holden can just say no, 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 and push all their problems onto other parts of the city. You mentioned accountability. Member deference is a system of unaccountability. Only there are 51 community or council districts. If I don't like what Bob Holden's doing, I don't live in that district. I can't do anything about it. If you look at the sweep of charter history, if you want accountability in the city, you have to give more power to you know, people who are visible, people who are accountable. If you don't like the mayor, you throw him out on his ear. In times past, when power has been decentralized in the way you suggest, it's not accountable, and that's where, it doesn't have good results.
Not accountable.
So I
Right, right,
have
right.
a question for you in terms of how you define affordable housing, or I'm sorry, lack of. Do you look purely, is it a numerical issue, or each community district is very different? I mean, we may have greater density in terms of, let's say, schools or other services. What does the built environment look like on this particular day versus 10 years ago? What is I mean, are there actual analogies that are accurate, an apples to apples comparison, or is it you're just going purely by the numbers?
When affordable housing, when that term is used in New York City, it means income restricted housing.
For new construction?
Does it
Oh,
mean
for new-
subsidized?
Wait, no,
Hold
for
on,
new construction, though. The numbers in affordable, the creation of units is the number of units that has been recently created. Is there a time period? Is it the
New-
last 5 years?
Last 5 years, new production.
We're not looking at the last 50 years or the
No,
last
not
30
50.
years.
So we're talking about the Fair Housing Fast Track now that gives the speaker and the council's fair housing framework teeth. That takes the last 5 years, looks at new affordable housing within that time period over all the housing units in a community district. So it's basically the rate of affordable housing production. And said that the community district 10 is in there. This would not be calculated until the end of 2026. I can tell you that when you look at community districts down at the bottom, so much of the city performs so poorly that one 50-unit project can get you out of the fast track. So especially in the wake of big citywide zoning changes over the last year, like that's why we didn't put out any maps. We really do not think it's responsible to venture a guess at who will be on there. The whole point is you create a neutral set of lists from behind the veil of ignorance, and then you apply those rules when the time comes.
I think, John, you said I was incorrect to put CB10 on, and you were going to tell me why. If your explanation is they could grow their way out of it before the list is promulgated, which, by the way, the list needs to be promulgated no later than October of 2026. City planning could promulgate this list according to the law the day after this election is certified.
We can't, Ann, because the time period over which that'll be calculated has not even run yet. And like I said, one project with 50 units can make the difference, with 20 units can make the difference. And so I understand you're trying to like scare everybody, but it is absolutely
John, I
irresponsible
want you.
to try to.
We'll have a debate.
We still have questions. So Josephine, you'd like to go, and then after Josephine, Dara.
Yeah, I think, I guess a question for Anne, because you talked a little bit about it in your presentation, and something that we have gone through, and that's two things. One is the discussion of neighborhood character, which is not defined in the zoning resolution. And so this board has been frustrated by that because it hasn't been defined. And there are things that are, in some of our applications that have not been looked at, like our school number crisis. While we may be at the bottom of affordable housing, we are the most overcrowded school district in the city of New York. We even have a school in an apartment building that took away apartments that's how short at one point that we were. And the Board of Standards and Appeals, our experience has been when we've had the neighborhood character as part of an application to a special permit for enlarging 1- and 2-family homes, and it no longer exists. But one of our arguments is that we had, say, maybe 20 applications. In 10, we cited very specific kind of tweaks in our advisory opinion, and the BSA, as if it was as of right, adopted all 20. And I think that's a concern that we have. So I guess my question to Anne is, in that proposal, other than the metrics of affordable new creation of units, which, some people would argue in Community Board 10, we may be currently right now at the bottom, but we are one of the most affordable community districts. And it's actually been mentioned in testimony at some recent hearings. Is that the only metric? Is the number of affordable housing units.
Well, but for the BSA, I'm sorry, for the ULURP fast track, the ELURP fast track for the lowest 12 performing community districts, it's definitely going to be a straight formulaic numbers game. It's
Okay.
a number of new housing units created in the 5-year look back period that John speaks about. We could disagree about when that could happen over the total number of housing units. And if you were to make that calculation today,
Right.
according to HPD open data, you have 7 units out of 55,768 units that qualify. And, so I don't think it's a stretch, no matter when if this proposal is adopted, when this list comes out within the next year. John and I can disagree of when the earliest it could be promulgated, but that the 5-year look back is going to put you in it, and a 20, he's suggesting a 20 unit project going up, and sometime in the next 10 months is going to get you out of this. I don't see it's likely, but we'll have to see but the answer to your question is, it is purely formulaic about which 12 community boards kind of get trapped for 5 years
Okay.
in this process. And then even if they try their best to produce more affordable housing, let's say they can, some can't. I mean, given, the market forces and rents and things of that nature, they can't graduate out of it. They have to wait until the 5-year reset.
Okay, got it.
And you are
Yes,
correct.
yes,
Neighborhood
no.
character is not defined. The Board of Standards and Appeals has been using that standard for as long as it's been in existence. And it's, like I said, it's very nebulous. It stretches what they say. You know what? No, this will fit into the character because it's near a train station, or you can cobble together. I'm not saying they abuse it, but it's not something that you could look at objectively and say this is going to happen because it fits neighborhood character, but this won't because it doesn't. It's a to be determined by the Board of Standards and Appeals.
Thank
Okay,
you,
thank
Anne.
you.
Okay, Doris, you have a question?
Yes, I want to reinforce what Josephine said, that we are already an affordable community. We have many, many apartments in our community that are very affordable. They are the ones over on our avenues, over stores, and in 2- and 3-story buildings, and other small owner, privately owned buildings with 3 and 4 stories. So we have much affordable housing. We might not meet the terms of, of government sponsored affordable housing, but we have affordable housing.
Thank you.
You
Doris.
have a public question?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Victoria Hoffmo. Victoria, you should be able to come off mute. Victoria, can you hear me? Victoria, you're on mute. You can unmute yourself.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello.
Okay.
I have to agree. I'm agreeing with Doris and Josephine. I can't believe that the criteria is new affordable housing. We are the most affordable neighborhood practically in the city. We've had new people that bought co-ops on Overington Avenue tell us we were the last bastion of affordable housing. We had another tenant there, our owner there, a co-op, also say he got pushed out of Fort Greene and Park Slope. So the fact that you're using the word new is going to be against us. We are being punished for being successful. We had a ULURP process. We did our rezoning with Councilman Gentili. Several of us that are on this meeting right now, it was totally revoked by city planning. One of the first proposals for breaking the zoning, 2.5 times what is allowed, has inclusionary housing. It is more expensive than our existing housing for a whole floor of a row house down the block from the new construction. It's actually going to displace people. So we are and this neighborhood pays more real estate tax than Park Slope for properties worth less. And we also employ, educate, have medical facilities way beyond our borders. We service people. We have more supportive housing between senior housing, the Guild, and Block Institute. It's not talked about because it's successful and nobody complains. But I feel like we are a model community and it's going to be destroyed by this. So I think that our voice has already been taken by the city of yes, and that we should vote no to all these things. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public members?
I don't see any other hands raised.
Committee? Any other question? No?
No? Okay,
I'm gonna.
that was simple. All
Well,
right.
I do have a
Okay.
question. I'm sorry. When we talk about that there's a crisis in housing in New York City, there has been articles and actual conversations about that there are thousands upon thousands of vacant units in the
Yes.
city that that are there, that are available, and that are not being, I don't know why they're not being looked at, or if they are being looked at, what is the holdup on that? Because that is already a household that's housing that is there. And why is that being held back? And then I look at, when we're looking to do this idea of fast track sounds great, but like all things, I believe that everything's a process and it should be thoughtful. Because there's so many elements that go into it, such as the yearly process. If it's a 7-month process, there's a reason for that. If it needs many eyes and many areas of expertise, given all of the years of expertise that have been showcased this evening. And all those coming to the table to go through the process, I understand. The issue that I have is that when there's affordable housing that's on the market already, we have NYCHA housing. That's in the news all the time, that it is in disrepair to great extremes. And that brings down value, and this is affordable housing beyond is the NYCHA housing. So when we're looking to add more large structures of affordable housing of a certain income level, which I don't even understand what the term affordable housing means. What number is that? I always hear it being bandied about, but I don't understand, what does it mean to be affordable? What's that number?
Gotcha.
Okay, that's a fair question. And when we have affordable housing that is being 100% funded by the city and run by the city, and they're in such great disrepair, and we're talking decades, what happens when we add more of that into a system that is already has pressure on it? Because we are the most populous borough in and of itself. Brooklyn was its own city at one time. We're the most populous. At what point do you say that we have too much people in an area? And that's why we have zoning in place, because now it's a burden on other elements of infrastructure, which is our sewer systems, which is our medical systems, which is our school systems, which is like even our supermarkets. So other aspects, when we're adding more to an already densely populated area, which that's why I believe zoning is in place, for one reason, right? So it can manage the population as it is. I'm just asking because, these are things that are of great concern to me.
No, that's great. These are really good questions, good concerns. When it comes to vacant units, yeah, that's something that we quantify in the housing and vacancy survey. 1.4 net rental vacancy, that applies to vacant and available. There are vacant and unavailable for various reasons. And we in the city absolutely spend as much time as we can trying to get any units that could be available. If you look at the numbers though, the city, various estimates, both inside and outside the government, say that we're about 500,000 apartments short of where we need to be. Vacant units, maybe tens of thousands of units. So that's part of the solution. We hear a lot about conversions as well. In the last year, we've seen a huge uptick in conversions from office to residential. That huge uptick means like maybe we've got 2,000-3,000 units in the pipeline. Everything has to be on the table to make this work, including all the things that you mentioned. But you're not going to get a solution to the housing crisis and its consequences without also trying to find ways to build equitably across the city. When every neighborhood can do its part, you can actually make a lot of progress without changing the character of any given place. And none of these proposals from the Charter Revision Commission would change the character of any place. It's all like a nip and a tuck and a nudge here in order to try to get some more housing. You know, like Ann said, council totally agrees that we have a huge housing shortage. We've partnered with city council on a lot of amazing stuff to get more housing built across the city. So that's why it's really weird with respect to this one thing. It's like, yes, we have a housing crisis, our hair's on fire, but you know, we're gonna argue in favor of the status quo. And we're not gonna, we think the existing system is working perfectly well in that regard.
I don't think the council thinks the existing system is working perfectly well. There needs to be massive amounts of more resources given to planning in the city through to your department, John, the Department of City Planning. Yeah, we do agree there's a housing shortage, but I don't think what we disagree with is cutting out the council and its 50-day review period to make sure that local community voices are heard and have real power in this process. The commissions, really what the sum effective is, and this is up for voters to decide. I'm just here to tell you what the practical import is to consolidate this power with the mayor.
Well, so the
But
idea.
I don't think we're
behind
going
these
to agree on
proposals-
this, so.
With the broad amount of testimony
Yeah.
and with the reports, we would encourage you to read the final report of the commission, which can believe.
Oh, my Zoom is sticking.
The commission was very focused on just policy outcomes, addressing the housing shortage. We were not in any way concerned with politics. And I feel like we've run into the buzzsaw of politics, but it's really, really hard to argue, and I don't hear that tonight, that enacting these proposals will lead to less housing in fewer places or anything like that. These are proposals that, based on all the testimony, would create more housing and affordable housing. What do we mean by affordable? So just to correct a few things that Ann said that are incorrect. For the BSA fast track, it absolutely has to be publicly financed. That's only housing development fund companies qualify for that, which is the state created vehicle for publicly financed affordable housing.
That's not what your bill language says.
Uh,
Yeah,
absolutely-
we're gonna have a debate.
That's what that language means.
All right.
That's what the language means in the charter.
Quickly.
Okay.
They absolutely recognize that the communities have anxieties about different types of projects. That's why the BSA action is project-specific approvals. You can't approve something and then use those for something else. So Coyle Street absolutely could not happen through these proposals. You know, and
But nothing could stop the BSA from approving a publicly financed homeless shelter under this special permit.
no, they could not. They could not. A shelter is temporary housing. It's not affordable housing. Their HDFCs are not the vehicle, and so I can unequivocally say that that would not be permitted. But we would encourage you, if you want to cut through the noise, to read the final report of the commission, to view the evidence, to see the proposals explained in detail, what they can and can't do. The commission really recognized where the landmines are and tried to tread very carefully to avoid those, to tailor these proposals to create the stuff that we heard people want without enabling loopholes that enable things that people don't. And because they're focused on policy, the community board review is not being reduced by a single day for any of these proposals. That was sacrosanct for the commission.
But it is just that the council member and the member deference is being reduced.
So your final point about process,
Well, we didn't answer affordable.
it's
I don't understand what affordable means. It's a term that is, you can say nebulous. It's.
Yeah, no.
so in the final report of the commission,
Will
the
you send out
commission,
the link?
the commission lists all the recent HDFCs, the publicly financed affordable housing. And for publicly financed, that's the stuff that reaches really low. Like the most popular term sheet is Ella, extremely low and low income housing. It
That
gets
doesn't
down to
exist anymore.
30%. It includes homeless set asides as well. So the BSA fast track really is for that type of affordable housing. For the other projects, you need to be at least MIH, which ranges from typically 40 to 80% AMI, depending on what option you're using, but that's privately financed. That's without support from the government. In order to really address this crisis, we need all hands on deck, including public subsidies, but including privately financed projects on privately owned sites as well, where we don't have the same degree of control over what happens there. So
Right, yeah.
Thank you. I just have a
Yeah.
string of questions.
Is it-
Josephine first, and then I have Sandy, and then Victoria.
No, so I think Stephanie, like, you talked a little bit about, what some of my concerns are, just in over the years. And we've seen some MIH proposals where the rentals proposed under the AMI exceeds the market value of the community. And I guess some of my concerns too is that the broad brush of community districts, we're very different. Community districts are different. Our built environment is very different from, say, community, a neighboring community board. And we are painted with a broad brush. It's almost in the proposals that we've read and we've looked at that we're not looked at with the diversity and the differences from population. I mean, our population grew 20 to 30,000 people, and that's with zoning changes allowing for areas of growth. And not understanding what these changes could mean for our district in terms of growth, in terms of our school numbers, in terms of our sewer infrastructure, which we all know here around this room is horrific. In certain parts of the district are really suffering from, not coastal flooding, but from sewer backups from, I know was sitting around the table here. We have areas of the district that, in wet weather and non-wet weather events are experiencing that. So adding loads, which is often not talked about, is a concern. So I think there's a lot here. And I wish we had this discussion and this conversation before the proposals were created, but I'll turn it over back to you, Stephanie. That's my only, it wasn't a question, it was more like some of my concerns listening to both presentations.
Thank you. Sandy?
Thank you, Stephanie. What I want to ask from both the people who presented today. When I, as a landlord, I build a piece of property and we want to rent it out to low income housing. What constitutes a tenant that would be considered low income to rent in my building that's a low income building?
Ann or
Either
John?
either Ann or John. I mean,
I would say in order to count as an affordable unit, that is an income restricted unit, you would have to be participating in some program or another, whether that's mandatory inclusionary housing or one of the term sheets I just mentioned. But it's not like a freelance type of thing where merely by renting to a person of low income, it counts as an affordable unit. And so different programs will have different incomes attached to it. So, but if you're talking about you're a unit that you own aside from any participation in a program, then it would not be an affordable or income restricted unit at all.
So the affordable housing is owned by the city?
It is not owned by the city, but it is governed by basically contractual arrangements with a government entity that restrict it to being rented out to people of certain income for a period of time.
Does the government select the tenants?
It's selected through the housing lottery system. So tenants apply, and then if their number comes up and they income qualify, then they get to pick that unit.
Tenants from any neighborhood in New York City could apply.
Yes.
If they meet the AMI, that's the average median income levels, they're in the program, they're selected by the central government to be pushed into any particular.
They get to select which neighborhoods they would want to be in. Sometimes it's the neighborhoods where they live now. Sometimes it's a neighborhood where they would like to send their kids to school or whatever. But if selected by the lottery, then that tenant has a choice as an individual, if they income qualify, to move into that unit in the neighborhood of the choice. And city housing policy is oriented around trying to support housing choice. Yes.
Those
Thank you. I'm
people
sorry.
have to be authorized by the
To
city.
go on. Sandy, does that answer? Do you have
Yeah, I just have one more comment, and I'll let go.
Okay.
If the city would work and just stop blaming landlords or labeling the landlords as being greedy landlords, and if the city would work with the landlords instead of looking to freeze rents, if they would work on lowering real estate taxes or lowering water and sewer rates, which, by the way, right now water and sewer is more expensive than gasoline. We all see yearly increases in insurances. We just saw a record increase in Con Edison and National Grid for electric and gas service. If they would work with the landlords and decrease the expenses that the landlords have to pay, then I'm wholeheartedly in favor of lowering rents as well. But you cannot lower rents, and you cannot keep on talking about rent freezes, just like we did under the De Blasio administration. And now, if and when if the Mandami administration takes over, it is just, you are just, it's a catastrophe for New York City to be one-sided and only look at the landlord's income and not look at the expenses.
Those are great points, Sandy. And I can tell you in the report, the Charter Revision Commission talks about a lot of this. The things you mentioned, like taxes and certain expenses, are beyond the purview of the charter, so they couldn't do anything about it. But this Charter Revision Commission was very focused on process costs, on wastes of time and money that get in the way of producing additional housing. And so I see the commission's perspective as very aligned with what you just said, focused on unnecessary and unfair costs, wasted time that put landlords, and other people who build housing in a very tough spot at this point in time.
I think that John kind of very ably described what affordable housing in terms it's regulated by the government in exchange for something, whether it be public subsidy or a tax exemption. But as everyone was talking, I kind of get the point of several of the other speakers are talking about you have affordable housing. I think that was in reaction to my saying, according to HPD data, you only have 7 affordable housing units created in a 5-year look back. And that's, as John was explaining, income restricted by a restrictive declaration that you file against your property that's regulated by the government in exchange for some kind of public subsidy or tax exemption, et cetera. And I think the point that was trying to be made is that you have what you consider affordable housing in your neighborhood, that people are able to afford it and move in. But that's not the same as rent as affordable housing, which is kind of only it's not very well defined in these charter revision proposals, but John kind of hit it on the nose. I think that the AMI ranges, can go as low as 40% of area median income. It could go as high as under MIH, you can go as high as 135% of AMI. But I guess it gets to a larger point generally of these proposals, maybe even aside, is what's affordable to who and where in the city. It's a big city with lots of different markets in it. And so I just wanted to acknowledge the point that several of the speakers were making earlier about, you guys believe you have affordable housing in your neighborhood.
Thank you, Anne. Victoria, you have a question?
Okay, hi. John, I want to say this, that the fact that it's being defined, this is all being defined contingent upon the fact that it has to do with new affordable housing, is really problematic. Definitely for Bay Ridge. I don't know about other communities because we have existing affordable housing. So the other thing is, where do you build this if you're going to build it if we have no empty lots? Because we're a very successful neighborhood. So you would have to take an affordable housing unit already there, knock it down to build less affordable housing. And we know that's true with the inclusionary housing because we costed out this new proposal for Ovington Avenue, and it's more expensive than our existing housing. The other thing that's not being taken into consideration is how much supportive housing Bay Ridge has. Senior housing, the Guild, and the Block Institute, which supports people way beyond our borders. So I feel like it's not a fair criteria for us. And I feel like it's going to tip the balance of our existing affordable community. We're never talking about affordable communities. We're talking about units. Every time they build the inclusionary housing in every community, some that used to be affordable, it has pushed people out. We've been told this by people who have moved here, and it's become more expensive.
I mean, these are great points. And when you spoke earlier, you talked about it's relatively affordable here relative to other neighborhoods, but costs have been increasing here too. You mentioned, about people coming here from Fort Greene and was it downtown Brooklyn, places that have become too affordable there. And so now they're coming down here. That's a consequence of the housing shortage, that there's not enough housing for people in neighborhoods where they live, where they might like to remain. And so they have to go a little farther out to places that historically have been more affordable, like Bay Ridge. So if we don't do anything to address the fact of the housing shortage and the gentrification and the displacement and the rising housing costs and the homelessness and the segregation that it drives, then, you know, neighborhoods like Bay Ridge are increasingly going to experience unaffordability. And so that's all this is. It's always hard to have this conversation in the context of a particular neighborhood because these issues, these dynamics are city-wide.
But John, what I'm
We're
trying to say,
We're very focused right now on Bay Ridge and what will or won't get built here. We should also be thinking about what will or won't get built in every other neighborhood in the city, which also affects what happens in
Well,
Bay
we
Ridge.
have to do
John,
that.
John, I don't have a problem with people moving here. I have a problem that we're not really dealing with why things are not affordable.
No, I'm just saying, I
We
know
don't
that
think that
we're
the
not.
solution is helping the affordability. We think it's going to do the opposite. That's what we're trying to
All I'm
say.
saying is not that you object to people moving here, but if people are coming to Bay Ridge from, you know, more expensive places, they're probably bringing their money with them, and those co-ops aren't going to be, you know, $200,000 anymore. Is all I'm saying. That's what a housing shortage does. I live in formerly affordable housing on the Lower East Side. 25 years ago, you could get a place there for you know, $50,000. And now it's like people trying to get in there for 10 times as much. That's what a housing shortage does. And your comments earlier were touching on that dynamic.
I disagree with your conclusion. I agree with Sandy that we're paying 60% more in real estate tax than other neighborhoods. I agree that there are people that are coming and speculating with money, offering 200,000 above ask for illegal conversions. No one's dealing with that. I think there are other issues that are happening that are affecting us that people are not touching on in the government. And I think this solution is not going to help. That's my point.
Okay, thank you. Just a quick question regarding environmental review. Have any of these measures gone through environmental review?
So the commission was very careful not to remove discretionary action or environmental review from anything at all. That is, any project anywhere that would have to go through environmental review under today's system would also have to go through environmental review under all these proposals. And so that's when things go through environmental review, when they're actually proposed. If a rezoning is proposed in Bay Ridge under these proposals 3 years from now, it will go through environmental review and we'll understand what the full suite of consequences for that would be. But as it is, because it did not remove, didn't make anything as of right, this isn't an action that is subject to environmental review.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't see any other questions from the committee or from the public. So if there are none, before we adjourn, I'd just like to quickly say to request a link for that Charter Commission report, please. And then to introduce one of our new board members, Michael Huang, and public member Ann Cooney. So two new, Ann is here in the room, and Michael, we don't see you, but I know you are present virtually. And if there are no other questions or comments, I would like to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
Took seconds.
Okay. Well, committee, thank you very much, and we will see you.
Thank you.
The next board
you.
meeting, remember, is not on Monday. It is on
Tuesday,
October 21st at the Fort Hamilton
Senior Center.
Okay. Thank you all for your